My husband and I come from similar backgrounds. Our families lived paycheck to paycheck, and not many went to college. We both have degrees and make significantly more than the rest of our respective families. When we got married, I was already the owner of a small house and had a car. My husband, however, had a lot of debt, and his credit was trash. It wasn't his fault. He had significant student loans and frequently had to help his family members with money. He also has ADHD and has mishandled some bills. I was understanding of his situation, but I was also anxious to help him get debt-free so we could have kids without such burdens on us. He was making $80K and I was making $100K. He moved in with me and we split expenses, 50-50, except that he didn't have to pay any rent. I fully covered the mortgage and home insurance since he's not on the deed, and I also paid extra into his debt so he could pay it off early. His car loan is in my name and I also cover half of that. I do IT technical support, and I got the opportunity to take a job that required 50% travel, but paid a lot more. Together, we decided that I'd do this job for a few years to shore up our savings significantly and pay off a good portion of the debt. I did this job for a little over 2 years until I got pregnant, and then I took a lower paying job, $120K now, that doesn't require travel. The travel job paid more, but it was so hard on me. I traveled to the back ends of small towns where the big warehouses and data centers are located, and the job was physically demanding, pulling cables, moving equipment, and working in very cold conditions. I was miserable in this job and ended up with some back problems, but it was a sacrifice for our family. When I was 8 months pregnant, my husband asked for a paternity test. It came out of nowhere, and I asked him if he didn't trust me. He said he did, but because I traveled so much, he just needed some assurance for his peace of mind. He said his family and friends have asked him how he could be so sure of this pregnancy when I've been out of home for so many nights. It really broke my heart that I did so much for this man and didn't try to protect my assets or my money, and he treats me like this. I got very hormonal and cried about it, so he stopped pressuring me then. Now our son's a toddler and he's back at it again. He's put his foot down that I need to have the paternity test done, and he won't sign the birth certificate otherwise. I told him his name's already on it because we're married, and I did the paperwork before they discharged us at the hospital. He didn't realize that would be the case and is furious with me, thinking that I tricked him. So here I am, stuck married to a man who not only doesn't love me or trust me, but is also an idiot. His family's calling me and pressuring me to let him do the test. My family's offended on my behalf, but some mutual friends are saying a test is not a big deal. But it's a slap in the face after all I've done for him. Am I wrong for how I'm feeling? How about you tell him that you'll get the paternity test, but in exchange, you want him to sign a postnup that protects your assets and finances, so he's not entitled to half in the event of a divorce. I fear that this isn't the end, that it'll only get worse. For example, he may get proof that he's the father, but he may not let go of the idea that you may have cheated while traveling, and he'll continue to baselessly accuse you. A colleague's daughter went through the same thing after her formerly loving husband started following red pill YouTubers. He actually moved out of the house and said he wouldn't return until she had the test results. She asked him to come back and offered to do the test after the baby was born, as the pre-birth test was just over $1K and not covered by insurance. He refused to come home and said he wouldn't be present for the birth. She had the test done, paid on his personal credit card, and told him to come home and she had the results. He came home to find the results on the kitchen table, stapled to the divorce papers. Ironically, he was correct about one thing. He was not present at the birth despite coming to the hospital and making a scene. And yes, he was the baby's father. My friend said he broke down at the divorce hearing and cried like a baby. Not the idiot. And frankly, you're asking the wrong question. You should be asking why you're still with this manipulative leech. He's been successfully taking advantage of you and is now claiming you cheated. Please see a lawyer and a therapist and figure out how to best move forward. This is just terrible. I don't understand why you're not outraged like your family. My fiance and I, both in our 20s, are getting married in a month. There's a dispute with my dad now, and he claims I'm being unfair, but I wanted to get some thoughts on it. So Dad decided he would give a speech at the wedding without saying anything first. He had shared the contents of said speech with his sister, my aunt, and she knew the speech would not sit well with me, so she mentioned his plan to me. So in this speech he already wrote, he talks a lot about how his wife is the love of his life, how amazing she is, etc. It's very similar to his speech at their vow renewal 10 years ago. He hasn't shied away from expressing to me that he never loved anyone like he loves his wife, and how all his past relationships pale in comparison. And that includes my mom, who was his first wife, who left him a widower with an 8-year-old son at the time. To make it even more difficult to hear, the vow renewal was held on my 18th birthday, and I got to celebrate my birthday by hearing Dad talk about how Mom meant nothing because the second wife was so much better. They were married 8 years at the time, but a lot of family and friends didn't attend their actual wedding, and they decided they'd basically have a second one to celebrate, and they decided my birthday was the perfect time to do this. Anyway, the speech he wrote for my wedding had a lot of this content from what my aunt heard from my dad and read herself. She knew on my wedding day the last thing I needed to hear was how much he adores his wife when he does so in a way that basically said my mom meant nothing to him. I told him I knew about the speech and he didn't have permission to give the speech at my wedding. Dad asked why not, and I told him I didn't want him to use my wedding to praise his wife. He said she means the world to us, so why would I say that? I told him she meant the world to him, but she pales compared to my mom, who meant the world to me and still does. I told him he might have decided Mom meant nothing, but that didn't mean I shared his feelings. He accused me of being sensitive, and then said it seemed like I didn't care about his wife at all, and then said she was a good mom to me for the 8 years she raised me. I told him she was never anything more than his wife. My mom died when I was 8, and I didn't get a new one. And the last thing I need to hear is how little she meant on my wedding day. Dad told me to be reasonable, and the bride and groom's parents typically say something. I told him nothing he had to say had a place at my wedding, that this is mine and my fiance's wedding, not his. I told him to get married again if he only wanted to praise his wife, but it wasn't happening at mine. He told me to stop acting like a little boy and grow up. I left. Then his wife called crying about the fight Dad and I had. This led to Dad calling me again and telling me to grow up again. Am I the idiot? Not the idiot. It's your wedding. Your father's insensitive here and acting like a little boy. Even if he had good intentions when he wrote the speech, your talk with him should have made it clear that it would be inappropriate to say those things at your wedding. He needs to swallow his pride and accept that on your wedding day, everything should be focused on elevating you and your fiancé, not his wife, and certainly not on downplaying the importance of your mother. I talked to his wife and explained the situation. I'd be mortified if I were her and tell him not to mention me at all. But if she's narcissistic, which would account for the dad's irrational need to praise her, she'll think you have the problem. And if that's the case, then you're right to enforce no speech. She knows. She was crying on the phone at me. She's upset that I wasn't willing to let my dad make the speech about her and how amazing she is. She's mostly upset that I didn't want her praises sung, and probably also that I was so clear with Dad that I didn't love her like he did. Then she's definitely the narcissist, on the more extreme end of the spectrum, and has your dad in her spell. Dad is someone that needs to stay home. His speech is inappropriate, hurtful, disrespectful, and insensitive. If that doesn't make him enough of an idiot, he put it on you and wifey called to cry, securing their positions as king and queen idiot. They deserve a text uninviting them. They didn't have good intentions. They wanted to use your wedding not to celebrate your relationship, but their own. Again, in their minds, it's all about them. For the love, this is your day. If they can't accept that, then they don't need to be there. I, 43 male, have 2 kids, both tween females with my wife, 42. So since it's summer, we've been going on a boat we own for the past few weeks. And last time, we offered to take my wife's sister's kids with us, and that was a complete mess. First, sister-in-law didn't inform me her kids, a tween female and a younger male, are pretty seasick, and they threw up on my back. But that was the least of the problems. They kept trying to jump into the water for some reason, completely ignored water skiing instructions, which I explained 6 to 8 times, and almost pushed my daughters off the boat while we were moving as a joke. When we got back, my sister-in-law lectured me about how I could let her kids get seasick, which, remember, I wasn't aware of. Lucky for them, my wife carries those white pill things. Then the kids complained I didn't let them do anything. This is untrue, because they gave water skiing a try, and they hated it, so then they did tubing, which they liked. That resulted in another telling off from my sister-in-law. I'm planning on going again this weekend. I plan on taking my sister's kids, 2 kids, my sister and her husband, and my wife's older niece of another sibling, 20. Am I the idiot? My wife thinks that it's mean, even though I don't really want to deal with that again. Not the idiot. Why would the sister-in-law even expect you to invite them after she and the kids basically said they had a terrible time because of seasickness and you not letting them do anything? If for some irrational reason she's hurt by this, you honestly say you didn't think the kids would want to go again because of the reasons above. I think sister-in-law sees it as free babysitting and free time for her. She's trying to bully OP into taking the kids along and letting them do whatever they want. Take them and make sure they have a good time this time. Somehow, trying to avoid seasickness is just plain odd, though. What a control freak to try to speak to the manager of motion sickness. Trying to push anyone off a moving boat earns a permaban all on its own. OP needs to stick to the narrative. This is a safety issue. Anyone that doesn't follow safety rules cannot be on the boat. It's easy for the other parties involved to drag the argument into other areas, like whether OP is mean, whether he's unfair, etc., that they can push back against. But none of that matters. Not following boat safety rules can lead to injury or death. So people who don't obey boat safety rules aren't allowed on the boat, period. I-29 female recently lost dad to a terminal tumor. Dad lived abroad with stepmom Jenny and our sister's teens. Bro 27 flew out when he could, and I worked overtime to see him. I worked 7 days a week to pay for my simple wedding so Dad could come. 4 weeks before the wedding, Dad said he couldn't fly. Fiancé offers to drive several thousand miles to pick Dad up, but he's too ill. Bro filmed the wedding and I flew out after with the tape to see Dad. Bro spent his last Christmas with him. We flew out for his funeral and many times after to see Jenny and our stepsisters. We'd never got on with Jenny, but his cancer brought us together to realize what was important, or so I thought. Jenny was our stepmom since we were 10 and 8. She'd slag off Mom and be nasty to Bro. I'd defend Bro. Dad stayed away as they hated conflict. I disliked Jenny even when I left home. When she met my now husband, but then boyfriend of 6 months, she spent 2 hours telling him how awful I was. I couldn't say anything as in a foreign country with nowhere else to go. When Dad got ill, we supported and cared for him and each other until now. A company contacted me regarding Dad's will. Jenny told me he didn't have a will, and I never questioned her getting everything as they were married. I asked Jenny for a copy, but there was no response. Brother calls me confused and upset. He'd called Jenny to ask what was happening with the will and pension. They spoke nicely for 50 minutes, but when he asked, Jenny flipped and screeched, "Don't you dare try to make a claim. You will ruin this family. I'll have to get a job sooner." Jenny didn't work, understandably, when Dad was ill, but he died over a year ago, and she hasn't worked since. Our sisters are independent. They cook, walk to school, and have a key. She could work if she wanted to, and she did work full-time before Dad was ill. Jenny messages calling us greedy, saying how traumatic Dad's illness was for her and our sisters, as if it wasn't for us, and that if we took the money we were stealing as adult children, it's odd to think we're entitled to anything from Dad. I nearly cry when I see her message. Bro says this whole situation is odd and believes that Jenny's hiding our inheritance. Still haven't seen the will, so I don't know if we've been left anything. If Jenny had come to us and asked for our inheritance, if she was struggling, we would have helped. But all the lying, there's no will and you're not in it, and then not showing us the will makes me want to know what she's hiding. I found out that where Dad died, all children are legally entitled to a share of his estate, no matter what the will says. Am I the idiot if we claim what's ours in the will? Am I the idiot if we claim the share of Dad's estate for us and our sisters? I promised Dad as the eldest that I'd look after my siblings. Not the idiot. Definitely look into it. Also, consider claiming life insurance and pension benefits. Many of those are legally directed to the family, and that includes you and your siblings. Get yourself an attorney so they can start asking the questions and getting the lowdown. Given that a company called you, and Jenny says that he doesn't have a will, I'd like to know if your dad named you and your brother as beneficiaries on his life insurance. If so, and if it's the same MetLife type of setup that my mother had when she passed, nobody else is going to get that money except the named beneficiaries. Jenny wouldn't be able to touch your part of it at all. Her chunk, if any, would be in a different account than yours, and your making a claim has nothing to do with her. Call the company back and see what's up. Held up. For starters, what kind of company is calling you about the will? Is it a creditor or debt collector? In that regard, you really do need to get this estate issue legally resolved, not just for the sake of your claim, but to see if there are creditors that may vie for the part of the estate as well. If he had a will and left something to you, you should have it. Sounds like Jenny just wants to be a freeloader. I've recently learned that my 30 female husband, 29, has been having an affair for 2.5 months with a girl from work. I found a stream of messages and 2 or 3 illicit images in his archived WhatsApp messages, but from reading the messages, I also learned they had intimacy twice in this 2.5-month period. She left the job last week. She left before she failed her probation period, LOL. I'm dealing with my husband and our relationship. His behavior is unexcusable, and we're exploring whether I can move forward in our marriage. I'm not looking for advice on this part. However, would I be the idiot if I contacted her boyfriend to tell him what I found? If the shoe was on the other foot, I'd want to know, but I don't know if I'm overstepping. I want no contact whatsoever with this girl. I will not give her a warning of what I plan to do. She doesn't deserve it. My husband has said it's ultimately my decision. He's neither encouraged nor discouraged me to do this. Not the idiot. As the wrong partner, it's okay for you to tell the other wronged partner if you want to. You have more of a right to do so than a bystander would. Most of us would appreciate the heads up. That doesn't mean he'll be grateful to you per se, but especially as they aren't married yet, it would be very valuable information for his future. I found out my wife was cheating just less than a year into our marriage, and I was humiliated knowing that our mutual people knew and no one said a word. There was no excuse, and not once did I feel gratitude and think, yeah, I appreciate you wanting to spare my feelings. Nah, tell him. As for husband, do what you need to, but remember this. You deserve to be respected, loved, valued, and appreciated. Believe it. OP, leave him. If it was that easy for him to find a side chick once, he'll do it again. My parents were married when I was born, just not to each other. Sorry, you didn't ask for advice, but I'm the side effect of a side piece, an extramarital affair. I'm happy to be alive, but darn, would have been so much easier if my father had just been a decent man. He wasn't, and poof, here I am.